Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Inspired Life Vancouver. I'm your host, Zara Durrani. Each week, we aim to bring inspiring locals who are making a positive impact in their communities. And we hope each conversation leaves you feeling inspired and motivated to perhaps follow your own dreams. Joining me right now is a dear friend. We're so lucky to have her here. She just came back from out of town, traveling around the world. She's an award-winning filmmaker. We met back in the day when we were both modeling. She was also an actress, but she's left that world behind to really make a positive impact on the world. She started her foundation, her nonprofit foundation, Iconic Earth. And I'm talking about none other than Nicole Watson. Nicole, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me today, Zara. I really appreciate you inviting me on the show and the opportunity to talk about some of the things that I've been up to and some experiences.
Yeah, fantastic. When I first started the show, I knew I wanted to have you on, but to track you down as you globetrot from one country to the next. You were in the Middle East, then Europe and Africa and LA. You're traveling everywhere, but Vancouver is your home base. I really love all the work you are doing, and it's been really inspiring for me to see the trajectory of your career, like first starting out as a model, getting into acting, and that's back in the day when we met. So with all the guests who come on the show, I really love to hit rewind and hear about their journey, that what inspired them to get started. So did you always know you wanted to model or act, or did you just happen to fall into it?
Yes. So modeling, I think, was a dream of mine when I was 12 or 13. And I did everything I could to get into that world. And at that point, I was living in a very small Canadian town in the Kootenays, about an 8-hour drive from Vancouver. And so we didn't have a lot of opportunity, but I was determined. So I was doing fashion shows at the local mall, taking modeling courses, watching Fashion File religiously every week, and practicing my walk and doing everything I could. So I was really obsessed with it at that point, around 13, 14.
Was there a particular model that you really looked up to? Or you're like, okay, I want my career to be like hers, or I want to be more like her?
I don't want to age myself, but this would be the era of the supermodels. Yeah. So we had Helena Christensen, Claudia Schiffer,
love her. Yeah.
Shalom Harlow, Christy Turlington, like all of these gals, Nadja Otterman. They were the supermodels. So I was following all the supermodels, and I would buy every fashion magazine. I would have them collage on my walls. It was truly an obsession.
Yeah, you were focused. This is what you wanted. And you did find success. You traveled. You were with Ford models.
Yeah. Actually, that's kind of something I look back on. As a 14-year-old girl, I was determined to be with either Ford models or elite models because that was the thing of the time. And fast forward, let's say 8 or 9 years later, I somehow signed with both. So
that's amazing. I didn't know you were signed with both.
Yeah, so I moved to Vancouver for college, and then I got an agent here. And the first agency that kind of recruited me was Elite Hong Kong. So off I went to Hong Kong, and that was like, for me, I had dreamed of being with Elite since I was 14. So it was just
you manifested it. Yeah, I feel like, knowing you personally, me and Nicole go way back, from conversations in Vancouver, from the shoot we did together back in the day, to like, I was working on a feature in LA and seeing you there and seeing how your life expanded. And I've found you to be a truly inspiring woman in my life who I look up to, and how your life has expanded. And I feel like manifestation is something I really see in your life, that you focus on, you declare it, this is what I want.
Yeah.
Then you make it happen. Like it happens.
So I would have never imagined doing runways in my living room in a small town of Castlegar, that one day I'd be signed with that. So yeah, Elite and then Ford. And it wasn't so much now, being with these agents and modeling, it's more the manifestation. So I set that goal, and that many years later, it came true. And that was a big lesson in life of, wow, I could really manifest things. I made this happen. And so what else could I make happen? Like, what else is possible? And from there, it went into acting and producing and directing, and then into the nonprofit that I now run. And
that's amazing. And we're going to slowly get into all of that. So talking about modeling, you got to travel quite a bit with that. And coming from a small town, Castlegar, to, being this, I'm imagining this 14-year-old girl who's like, okay, I want to be like these supermodels. And supermodels back in the day, they were like the ultimate celebrity.
Yeah.
They were they were everywhere. They were together. And you signed with these amazing agencies. Then what happened? Like, tell us about some of the accomplishments with modeling and where it took you.
I mean, I had bigger dreams with my modeling career, and actually it didn't. Although I signed with the agent, I would have loved to have gone to Europe and been on the runways and all this, but I wasn't tall enough at that point. There was a lot of standards in the modeling industry that actually don't exist today, thank goodness. But back then, you needed to be over 5'9". You needed to be have all these specifications. I think I was 5'8.5", like just shy of it. And so when I went to Hong Kong, it was more catalog, commercial, and advertising. Corporate advertising, mainly commercial though. And so it wasn't 100% what I had dreamed. And when I came back to Vancouver, again, Vancouver was not a big fashion runway type city. It's more outdoorsy. It was more film then, a lot of TV commercials, tons of shows being filmed.
But Hong Kong must have been still nice, being able to travel, to go somewhere else.
That was exciting. So being able to travel and already having some kind of capability to be earning money and to be in charge of your own business, which is essentially you are your business at that point. And just realizing like, wow, I have the capability to do this. I'm now in Hong Kong. We were going into China. We visited, and I worked in 3 different cities in China. And it was a really cool experience. And it was something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to travel. Aside from modeling, I also had my world map on my wall with a star on each place I'd go to. And I would stare at that map, determined to go to all the places. And for me, whether it was modeling or some other job, it had to include travel. That's like a big thing in my life. So
yeah, and now you've been to over 45 countries. So from modeling, how did acting come in? I would like to call it the acting bug. How did that come through? I mean, I know for me, it was a natural progression going, even though my mom, I remember back in the day, wanted me to get into acting. And I was like, no, I'm just focusing on modeling. But acting was just so special because you're getting to not just use your physical instrument, but your voice. Yeah. And then the digging deep and then the studying part of it was something I really enjoyed a lot. So how did you transition from modeling to the acting world?
So modeling to acting, I was always quite shy speaking to people in the class, having to stand up in front of fellow peers. I would go red, I go blotchy. And even now, people ask me to do public speaking and I'm still a bit shy. And that's something I'm really working on getting over. It's different when you're on set with a camera. There's a quietness and a calmness that kind of envelops you. And that part I appreciated. So actually, in school, I was in French immersion. So even though I was from a small town, we still had some things that we could have access to. And in the French immersion course, as part of our learning, we would make videos in French. So we would make music videos. We would create little theatrical performances. And so I got used to kind of bringing my parents' camcorder to school. And I started actually filming the students behind the scenes. And a friend of mine was into editing at that point. So he would then cut the...
And how old are you?
15, 16.
I love that.
And so between the two of us, either we were doing it for our French class, which was really cool because it was a way to learn the language. or I was just doing it for fun because I really enjoyed it. And although it wasn't so much acting per se, it was getting used to working with a camera and creating kind of these like mini documentaries or mini pieces.
I'm so impressed by everyone's stories when I have these conversations with them. And a lot of times you can backtrack to their childhood. And
Mm-hmm.
that makes me reflect even on my own being on stage, like in kindergarten, and the feeling that I got. It was like I turned into this different person. And that was the same thing when I was on stage as a model. So the fact that you're telling me I can imagine young Nicole and I know you now, like the work that you've done now. And it's so fascinating that how that's where the seed got planted
Mm-hmm.
and it was there and how it bloomed. So, going into acting, and obviously you're a filmmaker now, and you were doing some of that when you were a
Mm-hmm.
teenager. So tell me, you moved to Los Angeles from Vancouver and you lived there for quite some time. Tell us about some of your acting journey.
So I came to Vancouver for college, and I actually only stayed a few years. I left when I was 23, and I actually went to Australia.
Okay.
So I went there to pursue acting and modeling, and I thought I'd be there 6 months, and I ended up staying 6 years, and kind of went on another side path. But when I was there, I did study acting, and I did some commercial work, and was with scene models at that point. And I was in this phenomenal course there, and it was this course where the teachers in Perth, they would bring together students that wanted to be directors, producers, and writers, and we would do this sequence of workshops themed either comedy, action, whatever, for 2 or 3 months. The theme would be in place, and each person would have the opportunity to do their skill or their craft. So the writers would write a short film, the director would be able to direct it, and us actors, we would be able to perform it. And through the course of the workshop, we would do voice, we would do on camera, we would do study different historical comedy greats. And yeah, it was really a really nice program. Actually, I've now studied in Vancouver and LA, and this Australian program was was great. So I was there for 6 years, and it was after that that I then came to LA again to pursue the film industry, and jumped into classes there, which were also incredible as far as the acting component, because you had people with psychology backgrounds and really skilled professionals teaching you acting in LA. So that was a really great experience. And as far as booking work, LA is very tough. I did some small projects, a waitress in this film, and a commercial over here, but it was not the big time that I was dreaming of. So yeah, at that point, that's when I pivoted into producing.
Yeah. And one of the sense that I've gotten from you is that from the beginning, you've been very entrepreneurial. You've been very business minded, and also looking at your modeling career, even acting career, as a brand, and also looking at the business aspect. I remember when I was in Los Angeles and we connected, I was working on this indie feature, and the conversations I had, I was like, wow, I didn't think about it like that. Like every time over the years we've had conversations, it would always plant the seed for how can I grow more as an entrepreneur and look at my personal brand, look at my career as more of a business, like not just the creative aspect, but as a business. Because I find that sometimes creatives can forget that it's, yes, being creative is fantastic, but you also, how can we monetize this? How can we look at it? And then I believe that led you to producing and filmmaking, and you're an award-winning filmmaker. So, and then starting Econic. So how did that transition happen that you're like, okay, my career, I'm in LA, you were in LA for quite some time, and then transitioning to doing more meaningful work for the environment, and then starting Econic, like Iconic Foundation?
So I think, as actors and creatives, we always have something we're falling back on. So we're either doing another business, or we're doing a side hustle or something. And I, at that point, when I got to LA, I had some other business experience. So I had launched a company in Australia that I helped manage and run. Um, I had always had a second job, working in different, the restaurant industry or marketing or something. And actually, going back to childhood again, my mother had me opening a bank account when I was 5 years old.
No.
I was 5. She took me to the bank. I had my little bank book, and she started telling me and teaching me how to save money, my allowance. We would have garage sales every few months, and I could sell my toys and put the money in the account.
I love that.
And then whenever I wanted like something really cool, this cool toy or thing, she would say, "Oh, have you saved enough money for that? Let's look at your bank balance." And I would literally have to save up my money to buy that thing that I wanted. And then by 11, she had me working in her office. So she had a real estate company in Castlegar. And she would have me stapling the papers, answering the phone, typing things
At
out.
11?
At 11.
Answering.
Child labor. But so it was already, and even I wanted the Barbie hairdressing set as a kid. She got me the Barbie office set. So, like your parents kind of also help shape and guide you. But as I got into my 20s at that point, I'd had, of course, the influence of my mom. But I had started the company in Australia. I knew I was good with business people and good with kind of a business, and it seemed money. I was good at bringing money or bringing attention into projects. So I thought, why don't I develop my own show, write my own script, create something and see if I can bring some attention to this and get it funded and whatnot. So that kind of segued me into producing. And what happened is people saw the passion that I had for my own projects I was creating, and they started asking me if I could come work on theirs. So they said, "Wow, we love what you're doing here. We have this TV show we really want to finance or we really want to sell. Would you come on and work on it?" And I started getting paid and hired as a producer.
Amazing.
Which, and at that point,
and
then
that's
I was
all
making a lot more.
That's you just having the determination and the focus and just having the courage to be like, I'm going to do this.
Yep. And I think understanding at that point both sides. So you're now moving a bit behind the scenes, but you understand the front of the camera component of it. So it also helps with the language and telling the story.
Completely. And you're not disconnected. And you've worked on projects, correct me if I'm wrong, where you've acted as well as been behind the camera, right?
Yeah, more, some indie stuff. I executive produced a film called Jasmine. It came out on Netflix for a while, and now it's streaming. Let's see, a few shows didn't get off the ground, unfortunately. So we got as far as getting some financing in place. We developed the TV show, and we just couldn't get that second investor in place. Very frustrating. And I think at one point I thought, you know what? I'm now in LA. At that point, 6 or 7 years. I had founded my nonprofit, and I thought I really want to do more world work or impact work. Like scripted is cool. Doing these small acting gigs is great, but how am I helping the people and the world? And I was very passionate about the environment, even from a teenager. And I wanted to do something that had more of an impact. So that's when I kind of then started segueing into the next layer of...
So tell us, I know you've touched base on this a little bit. Tell our viewers more about your nonprofit work. You've been doing this for almost a decade, 8 years, correct?
About 8 years, yeah.
About 8 years, and it takes you around the world, Africa, Europe, Middle East, LA, and then Vancouver is home. And you've done these beautiful films that have won in India, and then currently your most recent project in Kenya. Tell us about that and how it all started and where you are now.
So what happened is I was passionate about environmental and wildlife conservation at that point, very much so. I was advocating for the environment. I was in New York with the New Yorkers Against Fracking, learning about hydraulic fracturing, how it's impacting the earth and also the communities when the water goes bad. Josh Fox did a number of films, Gasland. I met all those people, and I started seeing like, wow, with media, we can tell these stories and we can start changing things, changing the perception of what's going on in the earth. And this was before the whole sustainability sweep was taking place. And I was trying to think, how could I do impact level work that still positively impacted the environment? And I was sitting in a restaurant in New York, actually, just having a coffee. And this guy's sitting beside me and he's on the phone. And he starts talking about this turtle conservation and bringing in solar to help the scientists with this turtle conservation project. And I'm like, drinking my coffee. And then he puts his phone down. I'm like, excuse me, this sounds like a really cool project. What? And he's like, oh, I work in a solar company and this is just a side thing we're doing. And at that point, it like twinged in me. I'm like, wow, we could use renewable energy and solar power as our through line to impact communities and the environment, and use this technology to kind of shift things and tell the stories of what's going on. So, I ended up getting to know this guy and bringing in financing for his company. I brought an investor in. I became an advisor on his company, and the India project was something they were looking at. So it was through that connection that actually my business partner in the film industry at a production company, he and I put our heads together, and I said, I'd really like to do this foundation, launch it. And he said, I'll support you in that, and get the legal agreements all done. So everything kind of came together, and then off we went to India to collaborate with this person I'd met in a restaurant in New York, and bring solar into a trafficking rescue, which was kind of on the outskirts of Calcutta. So, and that's
where the Survivor Girls, Sustainable Future
Survivor Girls. So I did a documentary around that. And that first project was probably a lot less hands-on than the projects I'm doing now. I was kind of coordinating between 3 teams. There was the Sanlap, which is in India. There was Sanlap North America, ran by there's Indrani that ran Sanlap, and Sindura who ran Sanlap North America, and they were coming up with financing this solar power initiative, and then Terra Global Solutions was bringing in the solar for it. I went to India. I spent time with the trafficking rescue. I got to know the foundation leaders. I got to know some of the girls at the rescue, and I was overseeing the solar coming in, because there was a whole bunch of issues of bringing in the solar and getting it set up. And
so,
and then I was documenting that process. So I was coming in with camera teams while I was kind of there helping put stuff together.
And when you're saying you're bringing in the solar, these girls, these women, they're living in.
So at that point, it was fairly new. I was collaborating with all these groups. The girls were at Sanlap, which is a rescue facility in Calcutta. So there's housing units, there are education units, and there's kind of social areas. It's almost like a big complex. And they would go to school and stuff outside of the complex. Now, these are girls under the age of 18 that had been sex trafficked. Unfortunately, they're survivors of it. It was a very challenging subject matter, very challenging to meet girls that had gone through this experience and come out the other side, and very inspiring to see a foundation that was supporting these women to get an education and to get them into a new life path. The foundation had also set up little hubs within the red light district. So we visited those where women prostitutes will leave their children, so the children don't have to be in the home when they're working, because it's a multi-generational issue in India. If your parent does it, your grandparent, most likely the children will be in that business also. That's just how it works. So this organization would literally go in and get these kids out and get them re-educated and on their way. And then the women that got through that, they are some of the strongest women I've ever met. Like the ones that really kind of just embraced, okay, this happened, I'm past it, I'm moving on, I'm getting re-educated. They are like lions, Then there's the other ones that really can't get over the trauma, and you really see how the trauma has hit them, and it's a real struggle for them.
That must have been remarkable, but also very challenging to go there and film and get to know these women. And I want to know, how did solar impact them?
So in this particular facility, they have regular power outages, sometimes days at a time. And because the girls were often locked in dark rooms and asked to, do these horrible things in these situations, when the power went out at the facility, in their housing, or in the complex, they would actually go into serious trauma and PTSD, and it was very difficult for them because darkness equated trauma, torture, and all these things. So by bringing in the solar, what happened was, whenever the electricity went out, they were able to put the solar system on and continue to have lights, fans, electricity, everything working. So there was, of course, the cost savings for the foundation, which helped a lot, and also running their equipment, computers, sewing machines for the education facility. But the biggest takeaway and learning that we found was actually keeping the lights on and helping with some of the trauma issues that they were still dealing with, which made a difference in their lives.
You're doing amazing work, Nicole. And one of the things that I want to point out is, I find you to be very resourceful. The fact that how you had overheard this conversation. You're in New York. I'm imagining, obviously you've been living in the US for quite some time, but I'm still thinking of that 14-year-old who's now going around the world and taking chances. And sometimes, we have that option. I feel like, especially when you're self-employed, when you're a creative, professional entrepreneur, a big part of that is saying yes to life when life happens. Like here, on the show, I've spoken to so many individuals, and I feel like that seems to be the through line. It's jumping in, saying yes, even if you're scared, even if you're because you don't know, you could have not had that conversation with that individual in New York, but you did, and it opened doors. And then you're off to India, and then you're having this impact, and then sharing these women's journeys, and going on to create, this beautiful documentary that you did that won awards, went to many different film festivals, and it's led to. What does that feel like for you? Like when you sit in that you accomplished this, you did this work?
That's something I think I'm still working on, because for me, there's just so much work to do, and I never really sit back and say, wow, I did this. It's not about that. There's people in need in different parts of the planet. We live a very privileged life. We have access to so much, and we take it for granted a lot of the time. Working in India, it was really difficult for me to come back to Los Angeles and just be around people literally living in a bubble, complaining about their coffee or something. And I'm thinking, there are women locked in rooms right now, children that need our help, and yet we're worried about these silly issues. So it was actually that project was really hard for me to get through, just emotionally, kind of the paradox of these lives. And so I never really thought, wow, my film's won this award, and this is great, and I'm doing great. Because for me, it's like there's consistently work, and there's consistently people that need help, and an environment that is being polluted every day with not enough stoppers in place to protect it. So whenever I finish something, it's like there's more. So, and it's, for me right now, it's kind of sitting back and thinking, okay, I've also got to look after me, conserve my energy, but to say, wow, I've done this, I think can't
as
do
an
it.
outsider and as your friend, I see that. Yet at the same time, I do think what you're saying, I completely agree. Being born in Pakistan, I moved to Canada at 17. And a couple of years later, I went back when my grandmother was sick. It's like going back to Pakistan. I was from Lahore, and very similar conditions to like India, even though wasn't going there making the documentary in those conditions as you were. Yet at the same time, like you see it everywhere on the streets. And then come back here to Vancouver again in the bubble, and then I went and lived in a village in Bali for like 2 months. And it was very challenging to be there and to think that when I'm here in North America, my needs and wants seems to be endless. Versus when I go there and how, this whole family is living in one room and they barely have a shelter, yet they seem to be so content and happy. And it made me question so much, what does it mean to be happy? Like, what do you need as human beings to be happy? And what I came to was like purpose, mission and community. Like it's just so important. So as a friend, I can acknowledge that I really think that the work you're doing is truly remarkable. Now, tell us about Light, and tell us about What's On Project. You've been working in Africa, you've been working in Kenya.
Yep.
So tell us about that and what you're doing there.
So after the film the film in India, Sustainable Future Survivor Girls, got some traction. One of the festivals it screened at was at this little festival in Kenya, and I wasn't going to go, but I had this feeling, and I'm like, I should really go to that festival. I know it's a little tiny one, but I have some energy, like I should go. So I booked a ticket, went to Kenya, and at that festival, audience of maybe 20 people, little tiny place, but I met someone there who I'm now working with, and 2 years after that festival, I got a fund into my foundation, and I started looking for projects. I was looking in Liberia, I was looking in India, Kenya. I identified some NGOs we could potentially collaborate with. And it was that fellow that I met at the festival in Kenya that sent me one proposal that I had the best feeling about. So that introduction took me on this path to Kenya. And when I got there, for the second trip, I really had this like great feeling of, yes, I need to work with these people and I need to work with these communities. And it was kind of more into line what I wanted with the environmental and wildlife conservation, because these would allow me to work with communities that were living amongst the elephants, amongst hyena, baboon, all the wildlife, and still had a lack of electricity and a lack of light, essentially. So I partnered with an organization, Faisal Kenya, and we helped develop this program together for a region in the north near the Ethiopian border, a region called Marsabit. It's called the last mile region because it's kind of the area that's just left to survive. And people live in these amazing like mud and stick huts, and the women are beaded with some of the Samburu men have feathers, almost like a mohawk.
That's beautiful.
And my brother was a punk rocker in the 80s, and he had a real mohawk. So when I saw these kids with like the feather mohawks, I was just blown away. And the colors are incredible. And so I was really inspired to work with this group because not only did they have a need, but I found it fascinating. I found it fascinating to learn about the culture. I found it fascinating to learn about the fashion and the dress of these traditional cultures. And the wildlife. They were living amongst elephants and could tell you all these stories of these interactions with wildlife. And I thought, wow, what a blessing to be able to work with these people and help leverage their own abilities and help change their lives. So we developed the solar light distribution program, which we've now coined What's On for Power Watts. And my name's also Watson.
I was thinking of that.
Yeah, and we did 14 schools in our first pilot project, where we distributed lights to grades 7 and 8 because that's the biggest dropout age. And we work with schools that don't have electricity at school, and the kids don't have electricity at home. So they are literally using moonlight. They're using kerosene lamps. And that's about it. Or the fire, because they always have a fire in the front of the hut for cooking. And these kids want to be doctors, nurses, teachers, you know, architects. They have big dreams. There's not just because they live in a dirt hut with the elephants doesn't mean they don't have the same dreams. And yet they're writing exams that are the same as the exams the kids in Nairobi write. And the kids in Nairobi have computers, cell phones, light, and they're scored essentially the same. That score they get in year 7 and 8 will determine what high school they go to. If they get a low score, they go to these really kind of not so great high schools, not very good teachers, and end up dropping out essentially. So
you're helping change their future.
So with the lighting program, yeah, we really help change their future. We monitor the impact of the lights it has on their performance. So we don't just go hand out the lights and say, hey, yeah, we've done this. We actually do a whole training session with the parents, the teachers, and the students. And then we work with the teachers and the headmaster of each school to monitor the impact that the light is having on their educational performance. And then we get the statistics of each year. We're also introducing a grant program. So the best performing school will receive a grant of either sports equipment or some kind of educational equipment. And this allows us to kind of work with the schools to bring in additional programs. And
that's remarkable. And this is like a light similar to the one.
Yeah, so this is a sample. This little light, it's got a solar panel on this side. So the kids are instructed to bring it to school and charge it when they're at school. And then to bring it home at night and to use to study with. So it's got a few different frequencies, or like strong and medium and low. The parents are told not to bring it herding. You cannot bring this with the goats and the cows and take it from the student, because we're monitoring the student and really setting that into the framework of things. Because these are families that are pastoralists. They're nomadic. They move with the rains. Their livelihood and 100 years prior livelihood has been herding goat, herding cattle, and if you're very wealthy, you have camels, but this is few and far between. So that some of them don't see the need for the kids to actually go to school. Another challenge is the young girls are married off when they hit menstruation. Often they're married to an elder in the community for a small dowry, much like what happens still in India. And pregnancy.
In Pakistan.
Yeah, so pregnancies. As soon as a girl gets pregnant, there she is out of school. So it's if she has the chance to have a better education, there's just more stoppers in place that doesn't happen. And yeah, so although we're monitoring the educational impact, we're seeing a whole list of other impacts that these lights are having on the homesteads, on their lives, and on their mental well-being. And
how many schools to date have you brought light to?
So we've worked with 14 schools so far. We focus on this area. There's a big mountain in this area called Marsabit, and it's the last elephant herd is kind of in that mountainous area. And we focus on these little schools that are around this mountain. So they've got elephants coming through, and
that's so beautiful.
And, yeah. It's really.
If you need a crew, we're available.
It's really an incredible place. I really
honestly
feel blessed to be working there. Actually, there's such a light in the kids' eyes. They're just such special people. I've really enjoyed it.
I love seeing your photos when you're there, and I can see in your smile when we talk about purpose. I truly feel you're on purpose.
Yeah,
I can sense your.
Yeah. So I was
your heart. This is what you're supposed to be doing.
So in addition to the solar light program, we also went and built a school and a study library.
Okay.
And we had intended to build a charging station for phones, which would then be sustainable. People could pay 20 cents a charge. We set up a little business in the community. Actually, Benedict, my partner, kind of came up with this. But when we sat with the elders of the community, everyone sat in a big circle under the tree. They said, Nicole, we don't want a charging station. We would like a school. So there we were. We had this plan of like our stage 1 doing the solar lights. Stage 2, we were going to do a little charging station for phones, and with solar. And the community sat there and said, no, we don't want that. We want a school. So we went back to kind of the drawing board, looked at our budget, looked at what we had. We talked to the community. We said we need to work together on this if we can going to make it happen. And one of the elders stood up and he said, "I will donate a piece of land for you to build the school if you can do this." And I thought, wow, you know, that's already some buy-in from the community, like some accountability, which is really important. There's so many projects when you go up north in Kenya that are gardens that fell apart, schools that are broken down, you know, so many different attempts of projects that NGOs come in and then they leave and then the thing falls apart and people go back to what they did before. And so finding ways to get the community kind of integrated and involved is really important for the long-term maintenance of these programs. And yeah, so we went ahead, built a school and a library, a massive challenge. We were very under budget. It ended up costing more than we expected. I had gone back to school at that point. I had like zero income and trying to script and scrape from little donors, phoning all my producer friends in LA saying, please, you know, can you give us another 1,000 or whatever? Like it was, some people have a lot of money and they can just be like, yes, we built 10 schools, you know, but for us to build that one with just the
but that's
bits and pieces.
So powerful and like so meaningful, the fact that you would change lives through building this school. And I can only imagine, you know, you're working, I'm sure you have translators, you're working with people on the ground, they're locals. I know from what you've told me personally, but the fact that you're building a school and a library and what an impact that's going to have on future generations.
Yeah, definitely. So even, I mean, it's still going to tell its story because we literally launched in February of this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The chief of the community, he said that this will literally change lives, and even the mamas and the adults would love to have access to these books and read them. This is something that none of the communities have in the region. And yeah, so it will really kind of slowly tell its story over the next few years. And my hope is that, you know, maybe one day I visit as a grandma and somebody will come up and say, you know, because of that school, I was able to do this, and this. Like, that would just be great, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure that will happen. And sometimes we take those little steps, like the littlest thing that can have the biggest impact, and we don't even know, you know? I feel like sometimes you don't even hear from the individual of the impact that we can have on their lives, but you know, you're very intentional about the work that you're doing with your nonprofit. And no wonder, like I was just taking a look online at, you know, your documentaries, and we've known each other for like quite some time, like almost 2 decades. And we used to get together in Paris when I was living there in LA and Vancouver, and just to witness the success that you've had, it's very inspiring for me. And I really truly thought you would make such a remarkable guest on our show, and it really depended on your schedule. Like I wasn't even sure if I was going to have you here while we were filming. What is next for Iconic Earth Foundation?
So with our Solar Light program, we've just completed a film titled Light, which you mentioned. That we've just started entering in festivals. So we're going to do a festival run and then look at releasing it online somewhere. We'd love to release it on Canadian television somewhere. It'd be wonderful.
We may know a spot.
It's a 12-minute short, and we've added a little more cinematic flair, so it's not just a regular NGO film. We've created a character out of the old Land Rover Defender that took us up there, and we have, you know, that as a narrator and different little components to make it a little more easier on the palate to watch. We've also now partnered with a group in Germany who represent over 100 solar power companies. And we are looking to collaborate together to go out to 160 schools in Kenya and then expand into South Africa and continue with our Solar Light program, the What's On, lighting students' lives. So we're in the process of gathering donations for that so we can start that program this year and then into next year. And we're also looking at another documentary we can make around that, because as I was doing the film Light, I had a lot of TV producers and creators in LA giving me a lot of other ideas. And although we didn't have the budget for this short film I did, I've kind of put them in the toolbox and think, okay, when we expand the solar light program, we can create this other show around it to bring more attention to it. So
I would love to hear, you've had, done this remarkable work, truly inspiring, around the world, like living in Vancouver and LA, traveling all over. What advice would you give to an aspiring filmmaker? Because of course you're doing this nonprofit work, but you're also creating films while you're doing that. Mm-hmm. And I find you to be very resourceful, very entrepreneurial, very creative. So, and I think some of these things you can't learn in school. Like from my, you really have to take the risk.
So it's really digging deep. One thing you learn in LA with so much competition, I mean, you're up against thousands and thousands of people at each audition. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it really fine tunes what's unique about you and what's special about you that nobody else has. A quality, a passion, an interest. It doesn't matter, looks or this or that. None of that. It's what's interesting about you that nobody else has to offer, and you really fine tune that. And I think that goes into filmmaking also. What is an interesting, compelling story that you can get really passionate about, and that you can maybe put a slant on or an angle or tell it in a certain way from your perspective that will stand out. And number one, you've got the creativity from your own passion and drive. But number two, you have this energy flow, and tapping into that energy of when you're in line with something you're meant to do or driven to do. It's like this energy just comes from somewhere else, and that will help drive you and drive your film and drive your project forward. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when I've worked on projects, whether the first show I created, like Life and Style with Zara back in the day, mm-hmm. prior to that, like I didn't go to broadcasting school, I didn't go to film school, art school, like nothing. It was like I needed to had something to say. Mm-hmm. There was something about I needed to use my voice. And I would somehow always find camera people who'd be like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I would just out of the air come up with a concept. It would just manifest and people would say to me, you have a voice, like you are a personality, like you need to share. And I was like, no, I'm an actor, I'm a model. But I realized soon afterwards, no, there's something powerful about me being authentically me, which was, I was a Muslim immigrant from Pakistan living in Canada who wanted to not be like post 9/11 world, not say that I was from there because everyone was like, oh my God. But then as soon as I claimed that and started using my voice, things started happening. And mm-hmm. I find like in your career, it's amazing for me to see women who go after what they want and who make things happen. And you're truly, I'm so honored to call you my friend, to have you here today. And I think that no one better than you would be to give advice to people out there, whether they're wanting to be actors or filmmakers or just an entrepreneur starting their business, because you're a risk taker. You go out there, like tell me some of the top 3 things that you have learned over the last 20 odd years of freelancing and doing the work that you've been doing.
So in reference to what you said, yes, Zara, you have an excellent lens. So you've got all these things that attributes, but you have a very unique and excellent lens of looking at things and telling stories and getting information and conversations with people that they may not talk about just generally. You have a really unique way of opening people up.
Thank you.
And seeing kind of a path, which is wonderful, and I'm so glad you're able to share it on shows like these.
Thank you. I think I truly love people. And I'm very curious about
curiosity. That's really
what
a great one.
Drives someone, especially when someone is making an impact, having success, or going against odds. And I'm just curious, like, how did they get there? Because I think it's all in the mindset. Yes, education is certainly very helpful, but I really think that how we think and because
and
I
how
can
we feel. It's
yes, completely thinking
your
and
like
which is
soul kind of
impacting.
resonates.
Yeah.
Also, for me there's a gut feeling. Like so many times when I was going to move to LA, my family said, "No, what are you doing? You've just come back from Australia. You've done this thing in Mexico. You're broke. What are you gonna?" And I said, "It doesn't matter. I feel to go. I must go." You know. And when I went to New York this time, I ended up meeting people from the UN, the solar people. Again, I was broke, and I booked this flight to New York. And as soon as I booked the flight, a job fell into place to go work at this marketing event, paid excellent, ended up paying for my Airbnb, paying for all my expenses. But it happened after I booked the ticket. So it's like listening to your gut. Even sometimes your head is like, well, no, this won't work and that. But if that energy's there, you just have to kind of go and grab it.
It's almost like about not being realistic, like the logical. It's fascinating you say that, because even for when I moved Paris, people are like, oh, bien sûr, you speak French, and I was like, no, you speak French. I don't. I'm like, bonjour, parlez-vous anglais? And there was something like a calling, like it's almost like something was waiting, like even for us doing this show, like how Tiara, like we worked on this show together. We barely connected, but I would always like say hi, my co-producer, camera op, and she's doing everything else. And something inside of me said, we hadn't seen each other for like a year, to reach out to her and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to come with me? So that led to her sending me a message about this happening with Tell a Story Hive. And we barely had any time to like put this together. But we're like, okay, why not? Like, let's put it out there. I think we have to say yes a lot. And the realistic, the logical, or the parents or the cousins and the aunties and the uncles are going to be like, are you crazy? Why would you go there? Why would you move to Paris? Why would you go to New York when there is nothing lined up? There's nothing lined up. And then the same thing as you. I got a book deal and work after I had sold all my belongings, gotten my ticket.
And it's scary because
it's super scary.
You're jumping into the abyss, but you have this feeling, this knowing. And I think as a creative, we get a lot of really great experience working, coaching, training, leadership. We really jump into all this stuff, opening our energy fields up. So we're more receptive to this, and maybe we have a little bit of zaniness and we're ready to take the chance. Whereas it's really a struggle. If you're in a regular job, you are more practical. You've got this layers of society telling you have to live this way, you have to do it this way, you've got to do it this way, like all these freaking rules. I think it starts to press that natural instinct to follow your gut down. It's harder to do when you get in this situation. And granted, you can, once you have children and responsibilities of different things, elderly parents, it also adds a layer, but keeping that what is it, like that
je ne sais quoi,
that essence, that's not,
it's almost like the childlike essence, the innocence, the creativity, the imagination.
If you feel it, no matter what you're meant to do, you're gonna, the path will get you there if you're open to it. So there's never a wrong way. It's a risk, but so what? When you're laying there, your last few moments of life, are you really going to regret it? No. You're going to regret sitting in your, home or office every day doing this repetition thing and having all these dreams and wishes and not trying them. Like, yeah, you're probably going to regret that, you know?
Speaking of, you're so cool. She is also a member of the Explorers Club. You're going to be taking a sailing trip next week with your dad. You go on all these adventures around the world, like while you're working, while you're doing this amazing, remarkable work, which is affecting in a positive way so many humans, but also in your spare time, you're going on these beautiful. So tell us about Explorers Club, and you're really passionate about sailing, and you also have a scuba diving certification. Tell me about that.
So, it goes back again to that child with the world map on their wall and wanting to kind of investigate and see all these places. I love adventure. I love exploring new places and kind of things that are a little bit risky, I like,
Yeah.
So lucky, I'm grateful. My father, he's an advanced level sailing instructor. He always promoted adventurous travel to me growing up.
I don't know how to sail.
Yeah, I mean,
I need to meet your dad.
He kind of tells me what to do, and I just do it. But because I've been on the boat so much, I've started to kind of get a knack of where the wind hits your face and how to turn the boat and different things. And it was him that put me in scuba diving lessons here in Vancouver in the winter in a dry suit. It was snowing. I was freezing going into the water. But he said, Nicole, if you do it the hard way first, everything after will be easy. So I'm like, yeah, that's a lesson, another lesson I've taken into life, doing it the hard way first, and everything else is kind of a breeze. So, and the Explorers Club, this is a phenomenal group of people. We have astronauts, climbers,
Wow.
mountaineers, people doing incredible conservation, archaeologists, the top astronauts, they're all members. And that was, again, when I went to New York, I ended up meeting people from that club. I used to just attend as a guest and listen to the speakers in awe of these adventures they would go on. And then about 4 years ago, I formally became a member. I had 3 other members sponsor me. And so I'm part of the BC Yukon chapter. And we're a group that goes on adventure and expeditions, but also does studies about the places that we go. And then they write novels, papers. My filmmaking has come into play to become a member. And yeah, there's the Academy Awards, but when you go to the Explorers Club Gala and talk to these people and the adventures they've had, it just blows my mind. It's far more interesting than anything I ever found in Hollywood, even though I love, Hollywood in this life. But
it really feels like living life to the fullest.
Yeah, and the stories are just like incredible what these people have experienced. So the world is such a phenomenal place. Planet Earth is such an incredible place to discover. Nature is so inspiring, and it really promotes to kind of just get out there and get involved and be a part of it,
That's beautiful. What advice would you give to your younger self when you were first starting out? For example, like when you got into modeling, acting, what if you could go back in time? As you're a young woman in this industry, you're using kind of looks and different things. You get a lot of people that kind of try and press you down, or maybe manipulate that, or say things to you only because they want the power in the situation. And my advice would be to just, go within and stand up for who you are, and not to be influenced or be taken down by any of these characters that show up around you in the different stages of your life. They can really try to manipulate you in this industry, and it's just not to let that sway, to see the clearer vision and to know yourself, and that these guys are just, it's their own deals or their own issue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many great topics we've covered today. The show is Inspired Life Vancouver. I love to ask everyone, what inspires you in life?
What inspires me in life is the resilience in people, the passion people have to create change, positive change. We are living right now in a time where the pollution and destruction on planet Earth and the stuff we're doing is really going to have an impact for generations to come if we don't change things now. When I see young people standing up for environmental conservation, when I see companies shifting to be more sustainable, to look at everything from their packaging to who is making the garments or the things in these other countries, this is inspiring. And the other thing, that always inspires me is just walking in nature. You can walk down a same path every day in a park and see something different in nature. the way the trees opened up, the way the flowers shifted on days to day. And nothing in nature stays the same. It's always shifting and growing and shaping. And I think we can take that as a lesson. We don't have to stay the same and just do one thing and be rigid. Like we can grow and shift and shape and move just like nature does. We are a living being. And yeah, so these two things inspire me a lot.
Very well said. I see sometimes like memes on social media where it will be like, okay, someone who works in the day job and, and as an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, I gave up that lifestyle, but then I end up working 100 hours a week to do like my passion. And I find that's certainly been like my case when I'm working on so many different projects. Like even right now, we're working on the show. I'm doing this other thing. I'm acting, auditioning, meetings, and this and that. And you're getting pulled in all these different directions. What do you do to ground yourself? What sort of self-care do you implement?
So that's a really important one.
Especially because you travel a lot.
I travel a lot, but self-care is like a big proponent of, I was just at this big conference, this solar conference in Munich, and I'm driving with some of the team after, and the guys are talking about going out. We went out after, they're like, Nicole, what did you do after the conference? I'm like, went back to my room, had a bath, was in bed by 10 o'clock, really. I meditate in the morning. I eat healthy. I have a plant-based diet. I drink enough water, sleep, water, meditation, working out, stretching, yoga, Pilates, whether it's in my hotel room or my apartment, looking at a YouTube video or taking a class. And then having a community of strong girlfriends, of friends to talk to, which also helps balance personal life and other things as well. So
I find movement to be so important. It's so key. I was listening to a podcast yesterday where they were talking about how to change the thinking and our body chemistry. Instead of trying to force yourself or think yourself to change it, you change it by taking action. And the fastest way of doing it is through movement. Whether it's something so simple as going for a walk. I know there have been times like having my dog Loki over here who's taking a nap. It would be raining or like crazy rainstorm or hailstorm or snow. It doesn't matter the kind of weather. I have to take him out. And also it doesn't matter where I'm at emotionally. Yeah. I have to take him out. And it's fascinating. Even if I'm dreading it, when I come back, there's always something special that happens when I get fresh air. Yeah. There's something in my thinking that changes, or if I can put my phone down and just be with him and look at my surroundings, how that impacts. So do you do some, like for example, you're traveling all over the world, going to different cities. Do you take time to like just go explore? No idea of where you're going. You're like, and it can be a grounding thing because especially when you're flying so much and you're traveling everywhere, other than the beautiful things that you've mentioned, like journaling and meditation and yoga and Pilates, like do you do like exploring just like the city, aimlessly wandering?
Yeah, of course. So I love observing people. I love observing interactions. I love going to different cities and seeing how different people from different cultures interact with each other. I love like collecting data like this and then looking at from a global perspective from these, takeaways that I'm getting of how even the world interacts together. I love losing myself, wandering in the streets, looking at the architecture, the plants, or, daydreaming.
And I think that's where the creativity also comes from.
You're consistently, getting inspired. And if you are a bit stressed or your body's, tight, going for a good walk, breathing the air, like you said, it really releases that. Also, I've read this thing about a lot of people say, I'm not motivated. I don't have enough motivation but actually once you get moving and that energy flowing, that will motivate you to get the motivation. Like sometimes you need just to push your body to get into the flow. and that will open the door for the blockage that we might be having, or stiffness or whatnot. So and then meditation in the morning, both clearing the energy and kind of sitting in a calm state, as well as letting sometimes the emotions or the things that are coming up, just let them flow through the body and hold space for those. Realize they're here, they're part of me, I accept that, and kind of on with the day. There's two different techniques I go between, and I try and do 10 to 15 minutes in the morning before I start my day, and then get active some point in the day, and it's really important. And I think, people that are, like you said, running their own businesses, creative types, the amount of work and dedication these people we put in is really incredible. I just went back to business school during COVID,
and Switzerland.
I did a year to do an executive MBA, sustainability for business. Really nervous because I'm going to school with all these like people with corporate backgrounds, and I realized, actually, getting into kind of this corporate business world, how dedicated creative people are. Even though they're looked at as like the dreamers, kind of doing this and that, they're actually very regimented in their different trainings, the thing they're working, the things they're trying to get off the ground. Whereas the other people they go to work, check in, do their job, and then like it's less of a dedication because the passion is not always there. But it's still, it's still exciting and interesting in its own way. And actually going into business school, I was surprised at how needed creatives are in the business world, as storytellers, as visual artists, as concept designers. There's a huge need for this in the business world right now. So if you are a creative and you're thinking, wow, that corporate world, or I will never fit in, I don't have that experience. Actually, you're needed there at this time, because there's automation, there's these things that can do all these generic tasks now, and they need the visionaries to come in. Companies are screaming for them. And even in sustainability and doing impact work, there's a big layer of storytelling. How do you tell that story and share that story with the world? So the creative filmmaking aspect, it comes in really strongly and has a huge impact. And when I go back to LA and I see my friends, actors and whatnot, that they're really nervous about the business world. They think they couldn't fit in, but now I have this experience and I'm reminding them, yes, they need you. Like companies need you more than ever. So never think, okay, I'm only this, therefore I can't do that.
100%.
And to be able to bring your essence, you don't have to go into another setting or business world and be like, okay, now I have to be like them. No, be you. Bring that there. That's what they want. That's what will help change and shift the kind of the game for these companies, and to bring in some level of impact and support and whatnot, your own talents and skills.
That's truly great advice. I love it. I completely agree. Like 10 years ago, after I finished my first show, Life in Salazar, I was wondering how I would take my experience in this and monetize that, and I worked with a coach who he's in Italy right now, in Sicily, and I think Spain at this very moment. We're going to have him on the show. And he helped guide me to be like, exactly what you're saying is, you use this experience of being resourceful, being creative, and having a menu of like, okay, I can help you with X, Y, Z. And like you were saying earlier, while we're doing the filmmaking and the TV show hosting and the acting and the modeling and all of that, we have these other services that we can offer to people in the corporate world, in the business world. And especially right now, there is time and space and a need for people like us. Nicole, it's been totally fantastic having you here. And
thanks.
I know when we go for our walks, we talk forever. One last questions I would love to ask. Is there a particular spot in Vancouver and surrounding neighborhoods that you like to go to get inspired?
Let's see. Vancouver. I was born in Vancouver, and then I left for a while. Then I came back to go to college. And I always kind of come in and out. Right now I'm living in White Rock, which a lot of people say, oh, White Rock, it's this, that, or the other thing. But it's actually a cool place, you know. It's really nice. There's more high rises going up. There's more young families there. I love walking down by the ocean. It's calmer than Vancouver, but still, you know, part of Vancouver essentially. And it's kind of like a little beach town in a lot of ways. So I do enjoy exploring White Rock as my new neighborhood. In Vancouver, my dad keeps a boat in False Creek, so I do love walking the seawall and looking at all the boats. I love being by the ocean. And then I think if I were to choose a neighborhood, right now I like Main Street, so up around kind of the 20th and Main area, the little cafes. I'm vegan, so I love the vegan restaurants. And yeah, that's and then of course hiking, you know, the trails. Vancouver's just great.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad we got you here.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah,
it's
my
been great.
pleasure. And if you guys were feeling inspired, make sure to get in touch. Thanks for watching.